Hey guys, welcome back to the Danielle D'Onofrio podcast. In today's video, we are talking about permission seeking. Now, if you are finding that you are stalled a little bit on your healing and growth journey, or maybe you're having a hard time starting the journey altogether, you may find that one, two, if not all three of the things that we're going to talk about in this video might be getting in your way, and they all have to do with waiting for permission. So stick around. We're going to dive right into it. I'm Danielle D'Onofrio. Again, this is my weekly podcast, and I am a holistic healing and empowerment coach for adult children of dysfunctional families. We talk about all topics as it relates to healing and personal growth, propelling the journey forward so that you can break through generational cycles, replace your false beliefs, and really start to create a life that you love. Now, permission seeking is one of my favorite topics because I know for me on my journey, it was something that held me back completely at the beginning. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of that story as we dive in. So what I want you to do at the beginning of this video is really just pause and ask yourself, in what ways might you still be waiting for permission in your life? Are there things that you want or things that you need that you don't have yet, and why don't you have them? Now, there could be any number of reasons for why you don't have the things that you want or you need, or why you're not moving towards them, right? But I really want you to pause, maybe take out a pencil and a notebook and start to jot down some ideas. You're going to come up with a lot of different answers. Some of them will be real answers. Some of them will be maybe excuses or covers for the real answers, and that's okay. Like, that's totally part of the process. The whole journey is about exploring. It's about seeing what shows up, right? When we do different things, when we engage in different healing practices, and simply asking ourselves questions is one of the ways that we get to the answers we're looking for, and that we get to some of that buried insight and intuition that we really need to hear in order to step forward in the right direction. So you're going to get so much stuff. Now, the real answers, they're going to be pretty obvious because they're probably going to be a little bit tough for you to admit to yourself. It's sometimes hard for us to face the things that have gotten in our way over the years, right? Because we feel sometimes maybe a little bit ashamed or embarrassed, even though we absolutely shouldn't, right? We didn't ask to go through the things that we went through in the past. We didn't ask for the survival mentality or the traumas, right? However, we have to take full responsibility for healing and growth and really taking charge of our life because no one else can do it for us, right? No one else can do the inner work and figure out the answers that we need to transform our lives, right? So you're going to have to do this work. You're going to have to take a journal or maybe sit and meditate for a little while, or even just pause this video and take a minute to think about, okay, where do I feel stuck? Where do I feel like there is an emotional block? Or some sort of limiting belief that's sort of holding me back. Like, I know there are steps I could take to move forward on this thing. Maybe it's a business you want to start. Maybe it's you want to get healthy or lose weight. Maybe you want to put your artwork into the world, or maybe you want to start developing new friendships. Whatever it is you want to do, right, to grow as a person, there's likely something holding you back if you haven't taken those steps forward. Because a lot of times what happens is when we sit down and write what it is we want in life, and then we sort of back into the steps it would take to get there, we realize the steps aren't actually that hard. I mean, sometimes they're hard, but a lot of times they're a lot less hard than we make them out to be when we're just sort of looking at the big picture and we're getting overwhelmed, right? And we're coming up with all these reasons that we shouldn't or we can't do it. And usually those are voices from our past, right? Not our own voices. It's voices from our past that are telling us that who we are, what we can't do, convincing us of low self-worth and things like that, right? So how do we get past those blocks? Well, we kind of start to ask ourselves what's really getting in the way. And now sometimes this isn't a super quick process, but if we're focusing on permission seeking, it can be pretty obvious. So let's go through these sort of three reasons that may pop up for you as it relates to permission seeking. And, hopefully you've paused the video and you've kind of taken stock for yourself personally, but even if you want to do that later, you can come back and examine these couple of reasons, I'm calling them, that you might be waiting for permission to move forward on what you want to move forward on in your life. And now, I talk specifically about the healing and personal growth journey. And I think, you probably have heard, I don't know, maybe you have. I know I've seen on social media here and there, I'll see permission-seeking memes or posts. But the problem is that a lot of times they're associated with more specific goals, like business goals or health goals, right? We forget, I think, to talk about permission-seeking when it comes to the healing and growth journey because it's a little bit more abstract, I guess you could say. People have a hard time defining what healing and growth actually is, and actually we all have to define it for ourselves. But when there's a very definitive goal and we realize that we're not taking the steps to get there, it's easy to say, okay, well, are you waiting for someone to tell you that it's okay for you to do that, right? Or are you afraid that, someone's going to be upset with you if you go after that thing? When it comes to healing and growth, it's so personal. Before you're really familiar with it, it does seem abstract. And it's hard to gauge progress if you don't have other goals that you're tracking along the way. And that's sort of a topic for another day. But I will give you a little bit of a cheat code here. And that is that when you're on the healing and personal growth journey, it's actually very beneficial to have other goals and ambitions that you're trying to pursue in your life. And what I find is that people with bigger ambitions and bigger goals tend to travel along the healing path a little bit quicker for some of the reasons I just mentioned, because they're going after something specific. And every time they realize that something is getting in their way of achieving that thing, they have to pause and dig deeper, right? It becomes very obvious when their progress stalls because they're going after something definitive. Now, some people come to the journey and they already have those goals and ambitions placed on their heart. Truly, these people do progress along the journey faster. And I think that a lot of times that's why people come to the journey in the first place, is because they're like, why can't I do what I want to do in my life? Why do my dreams seem so far off or so unreachable, right? And then they start to question, like, why do I think the way I think? Why do I have these beliefs? And, it sort of, they tumble into the healing journey that way. And of course, you can back into goals and ambitions, right? You just have to discover what they are. We all have them on our hearts. A lot of times we're just disconnected from what they are because we're disconnected from our authenticity. All of those survival layers are standing between our true selves, our authenticity, and the life that we want to live. So part of the healing process is dissolving, actually, basically the entire healing process is dissolving those survival layers so that we can live every day from our authenticity. Okay, so you can back into developing goals, and that's just a matter of connecting with your authenticity and figuring out what your particular calling is. And that might be a process for you, or, ask the question and it might show up for you right away. But that's sort of a side note that goals really do help along the journey. But let's dive into these couple of reasons that you might have for sort of stalling right now, or feeling like you're stuck, or you're waiting for permission in a way. Let's just talk about how that might manifest. And I have 3 ways for you. The first one is you don't want to upset people. Now, going after anything requires you to adjust your mindset and to adjust your behaviors, right? If there's anything different that we want to do in our life, whether it's pursue some goal or it's just, heal from the inside out, we have to change what we do. We have to change how we think. And that is going to be, quote unquote, felt by the people around us, right? Because if we start behaving in a different way and our movements through the day and our routines change, people will notice that, right? And if we are sort of surrounded by dysfunctional people, right? Let's say we haven't yet set boundaries, but for ourselves with the dysfunctional circumstances that we came up with, through childhood and maybe teen years, right? You're still sort of in those dysfunctional circumstances. It's likely that you sort of play a role in the system, and the system depends on you playing that role, right? It's a dysfunctional role, it's a dysfunctional system, but it depends on you. So you know that the second you start to heal and start to change the way you think and behave, there's going to be a ripple effect and people are going to feel it. Now, part of the healing journey is realizing that you're not actually responsible for the emotions and reactions of other grown adults. We're always aimed to be respectful to a reasonable degree, right? And you do no harm, you take care of yourself, right? And if, setting boundaries or starting to change your life for the better causes people to get upset, that's their responsibility to manage. Now, one thing I'll mention here too is hypervigilance, or this acute awareness we have over how other people feel sort of at every moment. I mean, you can probably relate when I mention this if you're an adult child, a childhood trauma survivor. This idea of hypervigilance is where we're sort of, when you enter a room, you enter a party, or you arrive somewhere, you get to work in the morning, and your sort of nervous system and your subconscious is just already scanning the room to see what kind of mood everyone's in. Is anything different than it normally is? What are the signals for, oh, so-and-so's in a bad mood, or I better not, I better not upset so-and-so today, or I better do these things to mitigate any negative reactions and keep myself safe. Though that sort of hypervigilance or acute awareness of how other people feel, that ties into, not wanting to do things ourselves because we're afraid of upsetting people. It's all sort of the same thing. That's a symptom of codependency. And codependency is really when we rely on the outside world and the people around us to validate and approve and just to constantly let us know that we're okay. And part of the healing journey is releasing codependency. People pleasing is a symptom of codependency. We start to release our need to get validated by the outside world and start to realize that our self-worth is innate, that we already have worth, that it's part of us, and that we can trust ourselves, And so we have to begin to let that go. And again, it's a little bit of a process, but one of the things I talk about in my book, The Restorative Lifestyle Method, which you can find on Substack, the first 3 chapters are free, and I'll include a link in the description below. But I talk about the fact that boundaries, personal boundaries, are a powerful antidote to codependency, because they help us define who we are, define what we will tolerate, helps us create our reality by sort of drawing lines around and through our lives to help us really step into that, creative control, to step into our personal power, to, instead of just accepting the default of our circumstances, we start to draw the line and say, I will tolerate this, I'm comfortable with this, I like this, I want to move here, I want to go here. And you just sort of step into that autonomous role, and you're an adult now. So you do have autonomy, you do have your personal power to make decisions. And you give up that personal power every time you make a decision based on how someone else is going to feel about it. Right? And so this is really important. So this is another one. Sit down and pause. Like, it's probably pretty easy for you to answer that question. Who am I afraid of upsetting? Who am I afraid will be bothered by my decision to do something a little bit differently, or to pursue this dream, or to put my work out in the public, or to change my eating habits because I want to get fit? Who are you afraid it's going to bother? And we're not going to get into setting boundaries and too much in this video, but again, you can check out my book. Several chapters are dedicated to boundaries, particularly because boundaries was a huge part of my early journey. It's still a part of my journey, but it really gets you so much of the way to a transformed life because of all of the different aspects of what boundaries help us do in our lives. And essentially, and I mentioned this in my last video, boundaries help us sort of unmesh from other people and start to really notice our uniqueness and our individuality so that we can move through life the way we want to and in a way that brings us joy and peace, instead of constantly just working to keep everyone else happy around us and to play the dysfunctional role that we were conditioned to play. Boundaries really help us to break free from that. Okay, so let's jump into the second sort of way that permission seeking might be manifesting for you in your life. And that is that you might be afraid to disturb the status quo. Now, there's sort of two aspects to this. You could be afraid to disturb the status quo because for most of us, the status quo, especially in the beginning, is what's familiar. It's what's comfortable, right? And even though the circumstances might be dysfunctional and toxic, or they might be completely non-productive to where you want to go in your life, the familiarity is comfortable, right? And the unknown can be very uncomfortable. And a lot of times we stay stuck because we are afraid of the unknown and we just want to stay with what's predictable. But that's not going to get us where we want to go. It's just going to, keeping with the status quo is just going to keep producing the same outcomes, and you're looking for different outcomes, right? So when we are afraid to disturb the status quo, that can be coming into play, that you're just afraid to get uncomfortable. But, you know, there's also people involved in our status quo. So very similar. This is really just looking at the last point through a different lens. When we change how we behave or how we think or who we're involved with, that is going to change sort of the status quo for other people around you. Not everybody, but the people who are involved in your daily or weekly lives, right? And you may be deciding not to have the same type of communication with somebody, or you may be deciding to leave a job or to start working hard on something which makes you less available to people. It impacts other people. But as long as you communicate those things and you're respectful, as long as the circumstances warrant that, communication. Sometimes communication isn't the smart move because of how people behave, but it's going to affect people. That's the point. And when we come up in dysfunctional circumstances, usually we're very used to and conditioned to keep the peace, and we're always very concerned with not being a bother to people, not rocking the boat, not stirring anything up, right? We're just kind of want to keep the peace, not piss anyone off, not make anyone irritable, right? And one of the wound that's sort of propping up that mentality is the abandonment wound. And so many of us, when you have childhood trauma, you grow up in a dysfunctional system, in so many ways we feel as if we've been abandoned, or we actually have been abandoned, right? Everything occurs on a spectrum, and all of us have different experiences, right? But that abandonment wound can be extraordinarily painful, right? And so what happens is, even once we come into adulthood, we do anything we can to try to avoid being abandoned again, because we don't want to feel that pain again. I really think that the abandonment wound is one of the most painful wounds, and it's, I think, one of the wounds that sits deepest in our layers. I've been aware of my abandonment wound for so many years, and I've done so much healing on it, but it will still show up. 13 years into my healing journey, it will still show up once in a while and trigger a sort of a trauma response in me. And it's just so interesting how deeply rooted that can be, because it does feel like it's a survival issue, right? We feel like, how do I survive? But the thing is we're adults now, right? So we can survive on our own. We can be individual people who can stand on our own 2 feet and take care of ourselves. But the trauma of that wound happened when we were kids. So the reaction that we feel and the fear that we feel around the abandonment wound is the fear of that child that we were all those years ago, right? So it's a very painful wound. And so a lot of times, we are seeking permission. I actually think the abandonment wound is really what props up much of our permission seeking, because we don't want to upset people. We don't want to tick people off. We don't want to be abandoned. It's just, we're afraid. We're afraid to be on our own, even though we could be if we needed to be, right? And so, we have to learn that even if people fall away because we've made a decision that's good for us, then they aren't meant to come along on the journey with us. Now, if you really think about it, is it any way to live, to walk through your life not wanting to cause any stir or any ripples in the environment, and to be so careful and to be just tiptoeing around everything? That's no way to live. It's just, we're sacrificing the life that we have the opportunity that we have to explore our potential, to explore our creativity, to explore our ability to generate abundance and so much love. And life is so beautiful. And when we're living for other people and we're living to keep everyone comfortable, then we're just giving up our own life. And also, we're living so far from our authenticity. And the whole point of the healing journey is to reconnect with our authenticity. So we know, the way I coach is I like to guide you to sort of overcorrect in a way, sort of aim and experiment a little bit with rocking the boat. What can you, in a safe situation, in safe circumstances, practice speaking your mind. Practice sharing an opinion that you think others might disagree with. Practice a small new decision that's going to sort of change the way that you interact with people or change your routine, change the way people have access to you. We experiment and we go slow, but it really, everything in this journey is a practice. And so that's what we have to do. We just have to start practicing getting comfortable with maybe people being upset with you, or maybe circumstances getting a little shaky because you've changed how you're going to operate. And again, we talk so much more in depth about this in the book, The Restorative Lifestyle Method. Again, there's a link down in the description for that. And once you subscribe, so the introduction and the first 3 chapters are free. If you want to keep reading, it's just $12 a month. And that also unlocks not only the remaining chapters, but also like-minded community. I'm there in the comments to chat with you. And also, if you want to book personal coaching packages, those packages are unlocked once you have subscribed to the paid version of the Restorative Lifestyle Method. So one more area as it relates to permission seeking and what might be keeping us stuck on the journey is the idea of self-trust and the fact that we don't trust ourselves and we trust other people so much more. Right? We have an idea or we have an instinct or we want to do something, but we trust the thoughts and opinions of other people. Maybe there's a particular person, you trust their opinion more than you trust your own opinion. And one of the things, a golden thread that weaves throughout the Restorative Lifestyle Method is the idea of intuitive guidance. Some people call it God, just an internal knowing, but we follow our instincts and we learn to sense what is right for us. Intuitive guidance can show up as feelings, hunches, sensations, a calling, a knowing. For some people even hear actual voices or get messages in dreams. And there's so many different ways that we can connect to intuitive guidance, right? And throughout all 4 pillars of the Restorative Lifestyle Method, we have practices and principles for how do we tap into intuitive guidance and how do we learn to start trusting ourselves when it comes to those personal knowings. And the truth is that we are the ones who know what's best for us. No one else can give us accurate judgment or accurate opinions on what's best for us, because people can only see us through the lens of their own sort of reflection in the world. So if someone's telling you, oh, that's a bad idea, or oh, that's not going to be good for you, or X, Y, and Z could happen, really they're just projecting their own fears for themselves or their own insecurities with themselves. And they're not necessarily, some people will give you that kind of feedback because they don't want you to move forward and it's a little bit malicious. And some people will give you that kind of feedback because they love you and they're trying to prevent you from feeling the disappointment that comes with possible failure. But we have to be able to fail in order to move forward. We have to embrace failure and know that we can take steps forward, and even if things don't work out, there's always an opportunity to learn from them, right? But we have to learn to stop asking to stop running things by people, to stop asking for people's opinions and for their okay or for permission or just to validate our ideas. And now sometimes it's okay to bounce ideas around if you're sort of in a creative environment and you want to get input. But when it comes to the ideas for ourselves and our art and our life and our relationships, we know because we feel what's best for us. And so again, along this journey, especially following my Restorative Lifestyle Method, you're going to get very comfortable listening to that guidance and starting to trust yourself again. And once you trust yourself again, you really stop looking for permission, right? And once you trust yourself, it's likely that your self-worth is starting to rise again too. And once your self-worth rises, your fears of abandonment start to diminish, because you realize that if people do abandon you, if people decide to walk away because they don't agree with you or because you've made them upset, that doesn't have anything to, it might be sad and you might miss people, right? But it doesn't have anything to do with how worthy you are and how valuable you are as a person. It just has to do with whatever is going on in their life and whatever journey they're on, right? And whatever wounds they haven't healed yet. That stuff's coming into play. So it can be hard, but it does not define you or your worth. And so, all of these things kind of mix in, and they're not mutually exclusive. They're just different lenses for looking at the ways that we might be asking or waiting for permission, right? And when I was sort of very early in my journey, maybe even before my intentional journey began, I remember I was seeing a therapist, or I saw a couple of therapists, and I wanted them to give me the permission that I needed to set boundaries with the people I needed to set boundaries with, because I needed very strong boundaries, but I didn't feel like I was allowed to set those boundaries. I was on the precipice of my journey. I was just like right there on the edge of really starting to heal and grow as a person. And I knew I needed the space to let my nervous system calm down and to really allow my healing journey to start to unfold. And I just didn't feel like I was allowed. I felt like I was a grown woman. I think I had my son at that point, or I was maybe pregnant. I don't remember. But I was working. I had a home. I was married. And I didn't feel like I was allowed. I felt like I was a little kid who was responsible for meeting the expectations of everyone around me. And if, God forbid, I didn't meet those expectations, what would happen to me? I was scared. And really, that's why we look for that permission, because we're scared. We want people to tell us, yeah, it's okay. You're okay. You're going to be okay. We'll still be here, right? But eventually along the journey, what you realize is that you have to be there for yourself. You have to know that you're always going to be there for yourself, because you can't control other people, right? And once you learn all of these things, you're really off to the races as it relates to healing and growth, because you can just start listening to intuition. You can start making moves and journeying deeper into that self-discovery to learn about what are the wounds that are holding you back, and who are you beneath all of those survival layers. And it's really the most exciting journey. Yes, it gets a little uncomfortable at times. And yes, you have to journey into the unknown, but it is so rewarding to really start to figure out who you are and what you're capable of. So that wraps up today's video about permission seeking. I really hope it was helpful. If it was, be sure to hit that thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. This article is on Substack, so there's an article and then this video will go with it. So if you prefer video, you've got the video, and if you prefer to just read this in a little bit more of a succinct way, you can just go ahead and head over to that article on Substack. And like I said, my book, The Restorative Lifestyle Method, is mostly posted. I'm posting new chapters as fast as I can get them up, but there's about 15 or 16 available right now. And like I said, you can get the introduction and the first 3 chapters completely free. See if it's the right fit for you. See if that's sort of, if it resonates, and if you'd like to, continue to read my work and even work with me, you have a chance to do that with those first few chapters. So totally free, no commitment. You don't even have to put in a credit card until you decide that you want to keep reading. So, I hope this is all helpful, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.